Hi, I was just having a quick look at how to do adjustment layers. So here I've got a picture of a minion with a background. For this particular picture, I've blocked out some layers just to keep this simple. So for the moment, imagine I've got my background. I have put in a layer of my minion, but my minion doesn't quite match the background. So I might want to change, say, the brightness or maybe the colors a little bit. Now, the easiest way I can deal with this is actually select the minion. So I go to the layer of the minion. So technically on that layer, no other pixels exist. It's just the minion. So whether I can see the background or not, I'm on the minion layer, nothing else there. If I go to the one here called quick object selection, that's a really cool one to use for selecting an object within an isolated layer. So if I paint all around it and I let go, it magnetizes back onto just the minion without you having to select them another way. So now that I've got just the minion selected, I can go to this little circle here, create new adjustment layer. When I go on and pick an adjustment layer, I get to pick what type of adjustment layer. And I do encourage you to play around with this. Ones that you'll typically use for brightness, to make things lighter or darker, curves and exposure, and other ways of playing with how light or dark something is. Some color ones here, particularly hue saturation is an easy one to play around with. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of things you can do. So for the moment, I'll do a brightness and contrast layer. You can now see this layer has been added. Pretend these other layers don't exist. I've got this layer here that's visible, and my brightness, I can turn him down. So I can make you see the minion brighter or darker. So I might make the minion darker to match the tone. The really cool thing with this is that that layer, that adjustment layer is actually not final. If you have a look at my map here, the little white object means the layer is applied to what is white, the minion, but not what is black. But I can actually use the eraser and I can actually erase off some of the layer. So at the moment, if I'm on white here, I'm going to be applying more white. Actually, in that case, it's going to go black on the diagram in the bottom left, on bottom right, sorry. But as you can see, I can actually erase away some of the layer. Now, in my particular picture, I've got the sun coming from behind the minion. So I might want to have the whole minion not be dark, but I can actually use a soft edge. So I've got the hardness down to 0. I don't want to do a hard edge option. That's not what I want. So I'm going to use a soft edged eraser, and I can actually try intuitively think, well, what parts of the minion might still be catching the sunlight back there? And might be on parts of his arm. The bigger the brush is actually, the softer that blend will be. And maybe that's all it needs to be for now. And maybe the minion is a bit more blended in. Now I've already added a shadow here, drop shadow. That's an effect you can play around with down here if you want to. And I did have to skew it and do some other cool stuff to get it mapped onto the ground. But now I've got a minion who actually looks like his lightness and kind of matches the background. On that adjustment layer, I can still play around with that. And you can see here, the part that I erased away is erased away. And I can find what is the perfect amount of tone. If I found I made a mistake here and I actually want to put some of that shadow back on, I can go back to the eraser. If I hit this flip symbol, if I actually erase on with black, I need to make sure I'm on the right layer here. And I can actually paint it. Well, I'm not raising it out, black. I can actually paint it back on, okay? So, and now I can actually extend beyond the picture because technically it's taking up the whole space of the map. So if I went and did a huge squiggle of lines out here, obviously you can see the effect, and you can also see in the bottom right, that little X-ray vision has also reflected that change. So that is one way how to do an adjustment layer. And for that particular one, I've done it for color tone. I'll show you a very simple other one way that you could do it. Basically, if I'm on the background, if I make any selection, I might select just a rectangle of space. I've got a selection on that layer. I can go adjustment layer, and maybe I want to change the hue saturation. It's an easy way to play around with the color. I can actually bend the hue to match a particular tone. I can play with how saturated it is. So I can turn it black and white if you turn it down. I can also play with the lightness and darkness here as well. So you could actually do multiple of these layers on the background using any shape that you want. So any selection that you make, whether you've selected the shape of an object in particular or just made a generic shape, you just go adjustment layer. Curves is a cool one here because you can actually bend this curve. Dark tones on the left, light tones on the right, and you can actually grab multiple points and you can kind of warp the colors to do some interesting things. So I encourage you to play around with that. Again, the more extreme your color changes are, probably the less realistic it looks. So it's about trying to do it softly, subtly, so that it still looks realistic. So that is how you do adjustment layers on Photoshop. Hopefully this tutorial has been helpful for you. Go around and have a look for your image for your assignment. You need to apply to 3 different parts of an image, 3 different adjustment layers, making sure you have a good before photo and an after photo. Enjoy.